The bold night, the apples of youth, and the water of life. An old and blind king got word of a garden with apples that would make a man grow young and water that restored sight. His oldest son set out to find the fabled garden. He rode for several days, for the garden was in a faraway land. Even knowing he should hurry, he entered a widow's house for food and rest. As soon as he entered the widow's house, she trapped him in the cellar. The second son of the king set out to find his elder brother riding the same path. When he reached the widow's house, he too entered to rest and fell into the trap. The youngest son set out to find his brothers, and he too reached the widow's house. Seeing his brother's helmet, he forced the widow to free his brothers. Ashamed for having been tricked, his elder brothers followed him while he led the way to the garden. When they reached the garden, they were met by its guardian. "What you see can only be reached by flying. Take my winged horse," said the guardian. In the center of the garden, he found the apple tree and the magic water. That night, the knight's older brothers stole the horse and threw him to a cave. In the morning, the knight sought the nearest castle to ask for help. The king said if he could kill a dragon, they would help him return home, and he could marry the princess. The king and his men led the knight to the dragon's lair. Deep in the cave, the knight fought and killed the giant beast. With the dragon killed, the king gave the knight a giant bird so he could go back to his father. He gave his father the apples and the magic water and told him what his brothers had done. The king sent the jealous brothers to jail, and the knight married the princess. And they lived happily ever after. The end. The Ant and the Grasshopper. In a field one summer's day, the grasshopper was hopping about, chirping and singing to its heart's content. An ant passed by, bearing along with great toil an ear of corn he was taking to the nest. "Why not come and chat with me?" asked the grasshopper, "instead of toiling and moiling in that way?" "I am helping to lay up food for the winter," the ant answered, "and recommend you do the same." "Why bother about winter?" said the grasshopper. "We have got plenty of food at present." But the ant went on its way and continued its toil. When the winter came, the grasshopper had no food and found itself dying of hunger, while it saw the ants distributing everyday corn and grain from the stores they had collected in the summer. Then the grasshopper knew, it is best to prepare for the days of necessity. The end. A Christmas Carol. It's Christmas Eve. There is joy in people's hearts, but inside Ebenezer Scrooge's house, there is no joy. It's just another workday. Distracted by the singing of children, Scrooge comes to the door and shouts, "Stop that singing! I need to work and cannot get anything done with that horrible noise." Later that night, Scrooge goes to sleep proud of his money he had earned for the day. Suddenly, he awakes from his sleep and sees a ghost before him. "Scrooge," says the ghost, "I'm the ghost of Christmas past, and I will take you with me to your origins." Scrooge sees himself back at his family's house when he was a child. He watches himself having fun with his brothers and parents. He can still smell the scent of the fireplace. "We were very poor back then," says Scrooge. "Now I'm wealthy and I have everything I need." "If you say so," the ghost replied as he vanished. Later that evening, another ghost appears. "I'm the ghost of Christmas present, Scrooge," he says. "Come with me." The ghost takes Scrooge to a neighbor's house. "I feel pity for Mr. Scrooge," the neighbor says. "He lives in that big house all by himself and nobody loves him." Everyone agrees as they continue with their family gathering. "See, Scrooge," says the ghost, "these people are poor and yet they feel sorry for you. They have things that no money can buy. As Scrooge begins to have doubts about his life, the ghost of Christmas present vanishes. Moments later, a new ghost appears and takes Scrooge to see his future. Scrooge sees a sick old man lying alone in his bed inside a cold, dark house. Oh my! That's me all by myself on Christmas Eve, all alone with not one soul near. Scrooge then realizes this is no way to live a life. Regretful of his behavior, Scrooge says to the ghost of Christmas future, "Please, please give me another chance. I promise I'll be a better person. I promise I'll live the true Christmas spirit." Suddenly, Scrooge awakes. "This must only have been a dream," he thinks. "No, this was to be true." He then rushes to the window and screams out loud, "Merry Christmas, everyone! Merry Christmas!" Being true to his promise, Scrooge invited all of his neighbors for a big feast at his home. And from that day on, Scrooge continued to be a good man, earning the love all around him. The end.
The Story of the City Mouse and the Country Mouse. There once lived 2 mice who were the best of friends, but one mouse lived in the city, and the other mouse lived in the country. One day, the city mouse decided to pay his good old friend a visit, so he took the train, and off he went to the country. The city's many skyscrapers were soon out of sight as the train quickly left the city behind, and after a while, the city mouse began to see only green meadows and cows and sheep grazing in the grass. "How strange the country looks," he thought to himself. The city mouse finally arrived at the country mouse's home, where he was warmly welcomed. The country mouse had prepared a lot of food for dinner, but the city mouse wasn't used to simple country food, so he said, "I'm really not very hungry," and he ate a little bit of it just to be polite. When it came time for bed, the city mouse couldn't sleep. The bed he was in was hard and not very comfortable, and there were lots of crickets chirping and owls hooting in the night. "How does anyone sleep here in the country?" he wondered. The next morning, the city mouse was very tired, but not the country mouse. "Let's go for a walk," the country mouse brightly suggested. And off they went, but the grass was long and wet from the early morning dewdrops, and the city mouse's feet and trousers got all wet. He really didn't like the country very much. "You know," the city mouse said, "you should come with me to the city. It's so different there. We have restaurants to eat in, sidewalks to walk on, and very nice furniture. You'll love it there." The country mouse wasn't very convinced, but he decided to accompany his friend back to the city, just to be polite. In the city, the country mouse was surprised. "There are so many people," he said, "and there's so much noise." "It's just the cars," the city mouse replied. At nighttime, they prepared to go to bed, but the country mouse couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft for him, and the noise from the traffic outside made him jumpy. When morning came, the country mouse was very tired, but not the city mouse. "Let's go and eat. I know a fabulous place," said the city mouse happily. They crept into the kitchen of a nearby restaurant and were nibbling on the leftover food they found there, when suddenly the restaurant's mouser pounced. The 2 frightened mice quickly ran from the fearsome cat and barely managed to escape by a whisker. After scrambling over garbage cans and other bits of clutter in the street, they finally found refuge behind a grating in the building where the city mouse lived. "Sometimes this happens," the city mouse said. We need to be alert in the city." But the city was just too much for the Country Mouse. He said goodbye to his old friend and went back to the country where he felt he belonged. From that time forward, whenever nighttime came and the stars twinkled above, each mouse would gaze at the sky above him and think, "Oh, it's good to be home." The end.